The views and opinions expressed in the following program do not necessarily reflect the policies and the position of Now You Know.
Good evening and welcome to Viewpoint. Together with experts and newsmakers, we'll make sense of the week's biggest issues and stories. I'm Barnaby Lo in tonight's conversation.
It's a matter of record. Thousands dead, 70,000 imprisoned, and more than 30,000 people tortured during martial law under the dictatorship of Ferdinand Marcos. Almost 5 decades later, survivors recall that period as one of the darkest in Philippine history. And yet those facts are being challenged today by a movement that's propagating the false narrative of a golden era. The Marcoses are very much back in power, and their late patriarch laid to rest in the Heroes Cemetery. All this has the support of President Rodrigo Duterte, who activists say is leading the country with an iron fist. The rampant killings, weaponization of laws, and demonization of the press bear resemblance to Marcos's authoritarian role. As the country commemorates another anniversary of the Marcos martial rule, we set the record straight and remember the terrors of those years.
So tonight we will be setting records straight, and it's a little unbelievable that we still have to do that given that the Marcos years have been etched in our history books. But to help us do that, we have 3 guests who were witnesses of the terror of the Marcos years and also a historian. First of all, we have Dr. Carol Araullo, who was a former youth activist, of course, a medical doctor, and the current chairperson of Bagong Alyansang Makabayan. Good evening, Dr. Carol Araullo.
Araullo.
Araullo. May I just call you Dr. Carol then?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Sorry about that. And then next, of course, we have Sister Mary John Mananzan, who is the founding chairperson of Gabriela. She is a religious leader, of course, an activist, former president of Saint Scholastica's College. I hope I pronounced your name right, sister.
Correct. Okay.
Thank you very much for joining us tonight. And last but not the least, we have historian, academician, currently history professor at the De La Salle University, Professor Michael Charleston Xiao Chua. Yes? Correct?
Makasaysayang gabi na sa iyo, Barnes. Karangalang makasama ka at pati ang ating mga guests. Tinuturing ko silang mga personal kong mga bayani.
Alright, magandang gabi sa inyo. And of course, magandang gabi sa lahat ng mga nanonood sa atin sa Facebook. Pwede kayong mag-iwan ng mga tanong ninyo o ng mga comments ninyo doon sa comment section namin sa Facebook. And kung meron kaming oras, ay titingnan namin kung pwedeng masagot itong mga tanong ninyo ng ating mga guests. Okay? Alright, so let's start na po. 2 days from now, of course, is September 21st. And for Filipinos, of course, this date means a lot to all of us. Ito yung declaration ng martial law back in 1972 by former President and dictator Ferdinand Marcos. Siguro mag-start po tayo kay Dr. Carol. What does September 21 mean to you? What memories does this date bring up? How do you mark this day?
We in Bayan mark it by having an annual commemoration protest action. The purpose, of course, is not to commemorate it because we welcome it. We welcome that dark period in our history, but because we want people to remember, especially young people, about a bad part of our history which we have to learn from, especially because that history seems to be coming back with a vengeance. Personally, I don't care about 21. If only because it it is an occasion to um, to renew our commitment against dictatorship.
Mhm. Um, pero siyempre po, pagdaanan niyo po yung martial law. Hindi ho ba? So, meron po bang, ano po yung mga, kumbaga, pinaka naaalala ninyo tungkol sa mga experiences ninyo during the martial law years?
Ay.
Pinaka naaalala ko, yung nag-underground ako. Umalis ako sa bahay para umiwas sa pagkaka-aresto. Marami sa mga kapwa-aktivista ko ang hinuli. Marami ang mga kaibigan ko na napatay. Martial law decimated the best and the brightest of that generation. And that is what I will forever be really in grief about. Yung torture, I was arrested and I was tortured, but it was more psychological torture. I was fortunate enough to have been able to get in touch with my parents immediately after the place where I was in was raided. So hindi ako dumaan dun sa tinago ako sa safe house and they can do anything with you. And then also my parents had connections with Fidel Ramos and Gringo Nasan. So in that sense, I was protected from actually undergoing torture. But I underwent psychological torture. I was threatened with rape and so forth and so on.
Threatened with rape. I mean, that must have been a fearful time. Pero sister, correct me if I'm wrong, because I read that at first, actually, when you came home from Germany, and I think it was Rome, okay. And I think it was in 1974 or 1975.
74.
74.
Actually, I wasn't here. I wasn't here during the declaration of martial law. I was away from the country from 1967. I was in Germany 3 years and 3 years in Rome. So I was coming home, 74 nga, as you said. So I did not see, I wasn't here when it was declared.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe what you are going to tell me is that I said somewhere that while I was on the plane, sabi ko, ano nga ba to? Baka naman kailangan talaga ng disiplina ng mga tao. So
Yes.
parang I was giving it a chance, no? Baka ito ang makakapagbigay sa atin ng disiplina. Yun ang nasa isip ko nung nasa eroplano, no?
So what made you change your mind?
Oo. Nung dumating ako, the first thing I did was, I taught in Ateneo, no? I taught in Ateneo for 1 semester lang, no? Because I took up philosophy. My philosophy is my area of study. Pero doon nag-form kami ng isang group na ang pinag-uusapan namin, Theology of Liberation. Kasi that's one thing also that kasama yun sa pinag-aralan ko. And some of my friends said nga na nasa National Liberation Movement, ay naku, ano naman yung Theology of Liberation nyo kung dyan sa papel lang na yan, na hindi naman kayo kasama sa struggle, no? Naisip-isipan ko ngayon, how can I talk about theology of struggle? Wala naman ako sa struggle, di ba? So, nagbigay sa akin ng chance, yung tinatawag kong my baptism of fire, yung Latundenya in 1975, no? Isang taon after. Ganito kasi yun, di ba? It was prohibited ang mga strike. Pero yung Latundenya kasi masyado na yung paghihirap ng mga manggagawa, so they declared the strike. On the third day, sabi nila, dadating na daw yung Metrocom at huhulihan silang lahat. So nagkaroon ang mga sisters at saka church people ng telephone brigade, no? So I got my telephone call, I think from Sister Perpignan pa noon. She is already dead now, no? So tinawagan niya ako, sabi niya, Mary Jan, halika, punta tayo sa Latundenya kasi baka may mangyari sa mga manggagawa. Eh, tulog na yung aking superior. Alam mo naman ako'y Benedictine, kaya hindi ako pwedeng lumabas, especially sa gabi kung wala akong permiso. Sabi ko, tulog na yung aking. So, ang ginawa ko, sumulat na lang ako. Dear Sister Catherine, I'm going to the Latundenya strike. I don't know when I will be back. Love, Mary Jan. Tapos, nilagay ko sa kanyang door, no? Mabuti naman pala ginawa ko yun kasi later on, 3:00 na kami dumating. So, anyway, we went to Latundenya. Nandun kami ng 11, 12, 1. Nung 1 o'clock dumating, ang 6, parang ng mga Metrocom. Tapos, some of our sisters went inside at nakipagkapit basic talaga sila sa ako naman, kaming 4 naman ng madre, nandun kami sa harap kasi gusto naming pumasok sa bus at gusto namin na sumama sa kanila. Ang sabi sa amin ng mga sisters later on, di kapit basic sila, nung dumating yung mga Metrocom at sabi nila, lumabas na kayo dyan, kasi kung hindi, papasokin namin kayo. I remember me asking one Metrocom, bakit nyo po sila, huhulihin? Ano ba ginagawa nila? Sabi na, kasi curfew. Curfew nga, nasa loob sila. Kami nasa labas. Ba't hindi nyo kami inaaresto? Nasa labas kami. Sabi niya, hindi kayo kasali. Ganun. Doon pala sa loob, ang nangyayari, nung pinasukan na sila, pinagpupukpok talaga ang mga manggagawa. Yung mga sisters nakakapit bisig sa kanila. Can you imagine, pukpukin yung nasa right mo, ikaw hindi ka pupukpukin dahil madre ka, tapos yung left mo pinukpuk ulit. Tapos nagkaduguan silang lahat. Yung mga madre, iyak na, no? Nung nandun kami, biglang nagbukas ang pintuan at dumating yung isang truck. Hindi sila nakaupo, para silang herded like cows inside na nakatayo sila lahat at ang nakakashock sa akin, puro duguan yung mukha nila. Can you imagine yan? Yung parang si Cristo ba na nandoon sa noong crowning of thorns? Yung nakita ko, pero hindi isang tao, marami. Diba? I was so shocked. And ang tanong ko sa sarili ko, do you think Christ will say, turn your other cheek? Sabi ko, hindi siguro. Hindi siguro sasabihin ni Cristo yon. Tapos sila 4 na madre, at saka si isang pare, I forgot his name, Italian. They latch on to the bus. Akala nila bubuksan sila. Hindi sila binuksan. So lumalakad tumatakbo yung bus, na doon yung 4 na tao. Tapos si Barbers, siya chief of police noon sinugod sila tapos talagang forcefully na inalis sila doon sa. So ako I was so shocked na talagang nakita namin, nagtingin lang kami at mga 2:30, wala na, 6 na buses. 600 ata sila doon, ilang yun. So sabi ng mga kasama ko, let us have a reflection. Nagpunta kami sa Santa Ana, doon sa Ignaciana. Ako pa ang pinag-Bible reflection, ganyan. Ang conclusion namin, it's too late for us to help them during the strike. Dapat mag-umpisa tayo sa umpisa, sa mga conditions ng manggagawa. Right there and there, nag-found kami ng Friends of the Workers. Doon nagsimula yon. Na ang sabi namin, magmula tayo sa unjust wages at conditions of work. Doon tayo mag-umpisa. At yung pala, hindi lang yun. Kasi ang mga workers nakatira sa Islam area. Kaya ang nangyari, pati sa Islam area na kami nakapunta dahil doon nga sila nakatira. And at that time, si Madam Imelda naman wanted to impress sila George Hamilton. Kaya gusto niyang alisin lahat yung mga Islam areas, So ang ginawa namin, nakipagsama kami sa mga kababaihan. Alam mo, ang ganda ng kanilang strategy. Sabi ng mga kababaihan, marami po kaming santo. Ilagay po natin doon sa daan. Kung saan dadaan yung bulldozer, ilagay po natin yung si Saint Anthony, si Our Lady of Lourdes, Our Lady of Fatima, lahat. At saka susunod doon mga pregnant women. Susunod doon mga madre, no? So tingnan natin kung bubulldozer tayo.
So you really
hindi. Ano 'yon? Yeah,
so you really saw the violence and the abuse.
Oh yes, the blood.
But it wasn't isolated, was it? It wasn't just that, right? I mean, there were subsequent incidents of violence and abuse. And Professor Xiao, can you talk about that? Because you wrote a book about the torture methods during the Marcos martial law years. So how bad was it? How bad was the abuse? by the government. I think,
No sound.
Professor Xiao, I think you're muted.
Yep.
Yes, there
My
you go.
paper showed that itong mga abuses na ito ng militar, pulis at ng mga tauhan ng diktadura ay sistematiko. You know, these are not what you call this, parang mga actions of individual people who wanted to abuse their power. But actually, para siyang, although Marcos was saying that there are no tortures, no political executions that are happening. Actually, yung sistematiko kasi pare-pareho yung ginagawa. Pag inaresto ka, may mga iba't ibang forma ng torture, di ba? Nandyan yung San Juanico Bridge, no? Kasi project ni Marcos para kay Imelda yun. Pero yung ibig sabihin, ibibitin ka, isang tao ibibitin sa dalawang kama, di ba? O kaya yung water torture, painumin ka ng maraming tubig, yung pangunguryente, pagpapaupo sa bloke ng yelo, no? Russian roulette, minsan yung, I'm sorry to say this, pero may yung ari, minsan pinapasukan ng hibla ng walis tamboy, mga ganitong klaseng pagpapahirap. Okay? At hindi lang yan sa lalaki, pati sa babae. Mas malala kasi ginagahasa yung iba. Diba? Yan, nakikita mo na may pattern itong mga ito at nagtagal siya. Hindi lang doon sa simula ng martial law, kundi hanggang sa hulihan. At hanggang ito'y mag-escalate doon sa tinatawag nating mga patayan, political executions. Kasi nung una, sa totoo lang, bagamat may mga namamatay, nung panahon mismo ng batas militar, iilan lang talagang mga detenido talaga yung ginagawa. Pero nung mga bandang hulihan ng martial law, bandang hulihan nung diktadura ni Marcos, around 1983 to 1986, doon mo makikita tumaas talaga yung political na pagpatay. At hindi lang yan nangyari sa Kalakhang, Maynila, nangyari ito sa iba't ibang lugar, lalo na sa mga malalayong probinsya. At na-dokumento ang mga kasong ito. That's why we know that these things happen. No, may mga testimonya, mga tao. Pero hindi natin alam yung buong extent, kahit sabihin mo pang may mga testimonya, sapagkat marami dyan, sa sobrang takot na sa mangyayari sa kanila kung magkwento sila, hindi na talaga sila nagkwento. Diba? In fact, kung hindi ka namatay at ikaw ay nabuhay, pagkatapos nun, wala ka ng kaibigan. Wala ka ng kaibigan kasi lalayuan ka na ng mga kaibigan mo dahil under surveillance ka, tapos iisipin din nila, ituturo mo rin sila. Dahil nabuhay ka, dahil nagturo ka eh. So, biktima ka na nga ng human rights violation, ikaw pa yung iniiwasan ng mga tao. So, tandaan natin na itong mga abuso ng militar na ito noon, hindi lamang ito sugat sa pisikal. Ito ay may psychological, yun din yung nakita natin doon sa papel na isinulat ko na ito ay may psychological na epekto at may epekto rin sa pagkakawatak-watak ng mga mag-aasawa, pagkakawatak-watak ng mga pamilya, magkakaibigan. So, yung mas malalim na epekto ng martial law sa aking pakiwari, no, sa batay sa mga dokumento, ay bagamat may mga achievements sa pamamagitan ng infrastruktura, yung lalim ng sugat sa psyche ng mga Pilipino at sa pagkasira at pagkawalang tiwala sa institusyon, yun yung mga bagay na pinagbabayaran natin hanggang sa kasalukuyan.
And then Dr. Carol, dun sa student activist movement, may mga nawala, 'di ba? Mga bigla na lang nawala. Ito ba kumpara dun sa mga na-torture, sa mga napatay, marami din ba ito? At ano yung implication nito, naging implication nito sa movement ninyo? At hanggang ngayon?
Merong isang incident sa mga estudyante ng UP Los Baños. I think there were about 10 of them who just one by one they disappeared. Kasi ang usually ang nangyayari diyan, meron silang na surveillance, dudukutin nila, and then either beforehand nasundan na nila, so natukoy na nila yung iba't ibang mga bahay, mga tirahan, and then they will round up all these people who are somehow connected to one another. Or else, kagaya yung sinasabi ni Xiao, meron talagang mga hindi makakayanan yung torture. In fact, SOP na sa amin yan, pag may nahuli, you will presume na under torture, makakapagsalita siya, no? And therefore, yung alam niya na bahay, wag ka nang pupunta ron. Yung ganon, ano? But I'm not so sure about yung sinasabi ni Xiao na pagka kumanta ka, you will be isolated. Hindi, actually, naiintindihan naman ng mga aktivista na hindi lahat nakakayanan yung torture, no? Merong mga nakakayanan. In fact, some of my brother-in-law, for example, my brother-in-law was a lawyer. Sabi niya, after a while, yung torture, you get numb. You're numb physically, and then as long as you are strong psychologically, hindi ka talaga magsasalita. O kaya makikipagbulahan ka dun sa interrogator mo, no? Pagka nahalata ka, mas lalo kang pahihirapan. At saka yung mga nawawala noon, halimbawa yung isang kaibigan ko, si Manny Yap, he was the son of a justice of the Supreme Court, Ateneo graduate yun, ano? A very bright guy, no? Mas mahirap yung nawawala kasi yung pinatay, mas makikita ng mga kamag-anak yung katawan kahit papaano. Hindi ba Sister Mary Jan, meron kang pinaglalamayan, you know, there you can go through a rite of grieving, and then you bury your dead, hindi ba? Pero yung hindi mo alam kung ano nangyari, parang yung case nung si Jonas Burgos, yung anak ni Mrs. Edith Burgos na nawala nung panahon ni Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, no? You know, many of the families of the disappeared, until now, they do not give up the hope that they will find their kin. Of course, they're at the back of their minds, patay na yon, ano? Pero hindi sila nag-give up kasi ang thinking nila, what if buhay pa, no? So yun ang isa sa mga pinakamahirap, yung dinudukot, yung enforced disappearance. And it is happening even now, even as we speak. It is still happening. Kasi gaya ng sinabi ni Xiao, yung orientation ng military forces saka ng police na gumagamit ng torture at saka summary execution, it has become so ingrained. It has become so ingrained that yung torturer morally parang na-justify niya sa sarili niya. It's like parang tokhang yung mga pumapatay ng mga pinaghihinala ang mga addict o pusher, they become inured to the moral outrage of the summary execution. So ano yan, dahil sa impunity, di ba sister, wala namang
Lucifer effect. Lucifer effect ang tawag dyan.
Lucifer effect.
Yeah.
Sister,
yung impunity, no? There's not a single torturer during the time of Marcos who has ever been prosecuted and punished. Not a single one.
Mm-hmm. Well, sister, si Professor Xiao, he mentioned na yung torture wasn't just done on men, it was also done on women. And of course, you are a known feminist here in the Philippines. And as I mentioned, you founded Gabriela. So, I mean, did you witness this as well, the abuse on women?
Before I answer that, I'd like to add some more torture kasi I had a cousin na Diago. So, pinuntahan ko, bakit nyo pinaplansya ang talampakan ng mga political detainees? So, that is one torture. Paplansyahin yung talampakan mo. No? Alam mo, sagot niya sa akin, ay sister, gentle persuasion lang yon. Can you imagine? Pinaplansya ang talampakan, gentle persuasion. Well, I didn't know how to talagang galit na galit ako, no? So that is another part of the torture there. Ngayon, to answer your question, of course, you cannot witness that. No, nobody witnesses that. But I have a very good friend. Since he said it publicly, I think I can give her name. Si Hilda Narciso, di ba Carol, kilala mo si Hilda Narciso? Siya yung unang-unang babae na nagsabi sa madla kung anong ginawa sa kanya. Alam mo si Hilda, social worker yan sa Mindanao. Ngayon, meron lang siyang ibibigay na project proposal sa isang German na nandoon, dadalhin sa Germany. Yung pala, hindi niya alam na sina-surveillance na yung German. At sa kawalang palad naman, pumunta siya doon sa bahay nitong German to give yung project proposal right on the time na ni-raid yung German. So, napasama siya sa lahat ng mga nasa bahay, no? And they, of course, separated the men from the women. And she said this over TV, na nung araw ay Woman Watch ang pangalan, noong TV show noon. Sinabi niya na siya ay hiniwalay, nilagay sa isang so-called safe house, and I think 5 or 6 men raped her. So that is what you call gang rape. Sabi daw niya, wala ba kayong kapatid? Wala ba kayong nanay? Wala ba? Wala. Talagang sa kanila, yun ang Lucifer effect na sinasabi. Yung nawawalan ka na ng moral anything. No? So anyway, si Hilda ngayon, it took her, 1 year hindi siya makapagsalita. Parang nauutol-utol siya, ganun. Kasi sobrang psychological. Imagine, 6 men. My God, ma-rape ka lang ng isang tao, sira na yung buhay mo. Kung ito pa. Pero talagang she had the courage to say it during the time nga of yung Woman Watch. Si Nikki Cositeng noon ang anchor person. Alam mo, nung pagkasabi niya na siya ay na-rape na gano'n, 6 na babae ang pumunta sa kanya at sinabi, kami rin, ganyan din ang nangyari sa amin. So, ang ginawa nila, nagkaroon na silang parang peripatetic counseling. They would go to a restaurant, kakain sila ng breakfast. Tapos sila magkukwentuhan para lang ma-relieve yung, kasi 3 taon na, ganun pa rin ang nararamdaman nila. Walang talagang kailangan nila ng crisis center. At ayun naman ang nangyari, nagbunga doon sa crisis center. Sabi niya sa akin, sister, pwede bang meron naman kami talagang bahay na pwede naman kaming mag-counseling ng mga kababaihan, ito ang kanilang experience. So doon nagsimula yung tinatawag naming Women Crisis Center. At meron pa rin akong exactly the same ang kwento niya sa akin, na siya naman sa magsasaka, siya nag-organize. Tapos one day may tumuktok sa kanila, akala niya kasamahan niya, pumunta na sila sa magsasaka. Yung pala sundalo. Exactly the same nangyari kay Hilda, ginang rape din siya. So I'm sure dalawa lang yan alam ko. My goodness, ilan yung mga hindi ko alam. Diba?
Pero, so given this climate of fear during that time, I'm sure there was a climate of fear given all these abuses that were happening during that time. Sa pag-aaral ninyo, Professor Xiao, and I think maybe Dr. Carol, you can also answer this question. Why was there still so much dissent? And given also that people nowadays are saying that the Marcos years were the golden years of the Philippines.
Ay, naku
My
naman.
God.
Meron pong
Okay.
na ganun ngayon.
Gintong tanso.
Well, tandaan natin na kung may investment kasi si President Marcos kasi conscious siya sa history. Yun ang iniisip niya, paano ko maaalala pagdating ng panahon. At tulad ng ibang mga strongmen o diktador sa kasaysayan ng mundo, nagpupunla sila ng arkitektura, ng infrastruktura. No? Yan ang estilo ng mga ng mga diktador. Kasi pagdating ng panahon, sasabihin, ang maalala lang ng mga tao, hindi yung mga social program mo, kundi yung mga naipatayo mo. Kasi yung mga naipatayo mo, magre-remain yun eh. Kaya ang nangyari, syempre, may mahirap at divided ang tao, lalo ngayon, tungkol sa martial law, kasi may kakausapin ka na sasabihin, hindi naman sila na-torture, hindi naman nila alam yon kasi may censorship po noon. Kaya hindi nila alam na may masamang nangyayari. Ang mga masasamang nangyayari nung pinagbubulong-bulungan lang yon, nagchichismisan. So, dahil dyan, nabuo sa isip nung marami na maganda nga yung panahon ni Marcos, especially pag nakita mo yung GDP economic indicator 1973 at 1975 or 76 kung di ako nagkakamali, mataas yung GDP natin. Pero of course, ang alam natin, syempre dahil hindi niya alam kung kailan siya bababa sa pwesto, yun yung kanyang pagkakamali din na isang malaki. 'Di ba? Gusto niya magpatuloy bumagsak ang ekonomiya ng mundo at na-mismanage na rin at utang siya ng utang dahil sa infrastructure project niya. Pagdating ng pagbagsak ng ekonomiya at patayo pa rin siya ng patayo ng infrastructure at utang pa rin siya ng utang kahit na bumaba na ekonomiya natin, yun ang nagkaroon ng epekto. Kaya by 1983, nagkaroon tayo ng pinakamababang ekonomiya, GDP, na talagang dumausdos since World War II. At hanggang ngayon, hindi yan napapantayan at umabot na yan hanggang 1986. So, yun ang dahilan kung bakit nagka-EDSA revolution din, isa sa mga dahilan. Pero yung mga tao ngayon minsan dahil nga nadadala ng damdamin, nadadala ng politika, kasi ang problema dito, dinadala yung kasaysayan, syempre, nadadala pa rin sa politika eh. Ginagamit pa rin ang mga politiko eh. Kaya dahil sa politika mo, namimili ka ngayon ng mga naaalala mo. Yun ang problema. Kaya ako, pag nakikipag-usap ako sa mga tao, sinasabi ko, okay, hindi ko sinasabing mangmang ka kasi yan ang alam mo. Pero sana, maintindihan mo na may tao na ibang perspektiba dahil iba yung naging karanasan. At sana, pakinggan mo rin sila. Pakinggan natin sila. Kasi ang kasaysayan, kasi puro biography lahat yan eh. Sabi ng lolo ko, hindi history yan. Yan ay karanasan ng tao. Pero pag maraming karanasan ng tao, pinagsama-sama mo, doon mo i-analyze, may mga, sabihin na natin, sige, may mga magagandang naidulot, pero at what cost? At what cost? Tama eh. Kung nakatakas sila ng 10 bilyon kasama ng kanilang mga crony, nananakaw sa gobyerno, ang sabi ng mga sumunod na leader, 10 bilyon? Nakatakas? Di ba? Human rights violation? Nakatakas? Eh di, pwede ko na rin gawin yun. Yun yung sinasabi nila na impunity. So malalim po yung sugat kahit na sabihin mong may mga infrastructure achievements, malalim yung sugat na ginawa sa ating lipunan. Ang problema kasi, yung snatcher, naramdaman mong nanakawan ka. Totoo yan. Yung snatcher, naramdaman mong nanakawan ka, gusto mong kurutin eh. Pero yung plunderer, kahit bilyon-bilyon ng ninakaw, na pwede sanang makapagligtas ng mas marami pang buhay, hindi mo nararamdaman yun. Kaya feeling mo, hindi ka pa rin nanakawan.
Dr. Carol, you lived through martial law, of course. And ito nga yung sinasabi ni Professor Xiao na iba yung naging experience ninyo, tapos iba din yung naging experience ng iba kasi wala silang kaalam-alam kung ano yung naging experience ninyo. Pero sinasabi naman nila na ang ganda naman ng buhay nung panahon na yon. Pero why were you still dissenting during that time? And like I said, despite that climate of fear that Marcos had created.
Well, unang-una, being activist, when martial law was declared, kami yung nanalo sa student council ng landslide noon, Ang chairperson ko si Jimmy Tan, who became later on the Secretary of Health. So, nung nag-martial law, hindi naman alam mo, hindi ka na matatangay dun sa mga buladas. Kasi hand in glove with the strongman rule, yung kamay na bakal, meron ding glove no? And Marcos made extremely good use of yung pandoloko, no? Mga limbawa, nagpagawa siya ng kanta, Bagong Lipunan, at saka walang media no na independent. So ginamit niya yung media to project an image that all is well, no? Siyempre, yung mga pangunahing target ng panunupil yung mga lumalaban. Siyempre, di ba? Mga oposisyon, mga kritiko sa mass media, yung mga profesor, mga intellectual, student activists, and then unionized workers, no? Yung mga alam nila ang karapatan nila at hindi sila papayag na basta na lang sila patahimikin. And also mga magsasaka and urban poor who were fighting for their rights and their welfare. So yun ang unang target. Yun lalaban at lalaban talaga yun, no? To the extent na the more they were being repressed, the more the impetus para lumaban. Hindi syempre, tapos yung mga kamag-anak nila, yung mga kaibigan nila na alam ang nangyayari, nadadamay din yon. Pero yung mga taong hindi apolitical o walang kamuwang-muwang, yung sa masa, yun namang so-called progress, yung mga edifices, kasi si Imelda built edifices, the heart center, the kidney center, the lung center, the cultural center. That is also part of the culture of dictatorship, to build monuments that will be testaments to your being such accomplished leaders, no? Ano yun sa masa, nararamdaman nila na puro palamuti. Halimbawa, yung sinabi ni Sister Mary dyan, merong darating na bisita si Melda, gusto niya malinis yung daan. Bali wala sa kanya, demolish na yung mga bahay ng mga maralita, no? Syempre yung maralita, tinatanggalan ka ng tirahan. So kahit na anong propaganda ng New Society, etc., hindi ka basta-basta maloloko. Ngayon yung mga middle class, yung mga professionals, halimbawa, yung mga they started organizing, ang talagang nakaantig sa kanila yung human rights violations yung mga massacres, yung mga torture. Halimbawa sa health sector, nagtayo kami ng medical action group. Sa mga abogado, nagtayo ng free legal assistance group. And ang orientation is to help these victims. And of course, there were prominent individuals like Pepe Jokno and Senator Tanyada, who are lawyers. And so the professionals could identify with them. Sa amin naman, si Dr. De La Paz, who was killed in Samar, and si Janice Candor, who was tortured, no? And graduate sila ng UPPGH. So yun ang nag-ano dun sa mga who were relatively comfortable, Pero gaya ng sabi ni Xiao, after a while things started to deteriorate. Even the economy started to deteriorate. And nung early part ng Marcos years, there was this yung maraming pera yung mga Middle Eastern countries no? So there was a lot of money going around globally. So ang dali-daling mangutang noon. Kaya lang yung mga inuutang ni Marcos na yon, nawawaldas lahat yun at saka nabubulsa no? Primary example, yung Bataan Nuclear Power Plant. That power plant was sold to us for the price of 2 nuclear power plants. Isang power plant lang ang binigay sa atin dahil binulsa na ng mga crony ni Marcos at saka binulsa na rin ng mga bangko yung na up until about 25 years ago, we were still paying for it, for the loans at the nuclear power plant, no? So all of this came back with the economy started to deteriorate. And also politically, Marcos, the dictatorship was beginning to become isolated. And so even investors were thinking twice about bringing money in. And of course, yung political opposition were also gaining traction. si Ninoy Aquino was a prominent voice even when he was in the US. Tapos pag uwi na niya at inassassinate siya so brazenly, that really unleashed a storm of protest na hindi na talaga mapigilan ni Marcos yon. And even within the military, meron na ring mga biyakan kasi ang katangian talaga ng diktadura, magkakaroon ng mga paksyon-paksyon diyan eh. And the pro-Bear faction, Bear was the AFP chief, and the pro-Enrile faction, nagbangga-banggaan na yan eh. So even within the military, meron ng break dyan. And this is the group that tried to initiate a coup d'etat, which of course failed.
So it appeared lang, no, sister? Kasi natatawa ka kanina eh when I said golden years, ano? So parang ang nakukuha ko sa inyo is it only appeared that everything was well. Pero underneath, nabubulok na talaga.
Alam mo kasi, hindi ba I told you na we founded the Friends of the Workers, at pagkatapos niya nakasama namin nga yung mga urban poor, and then yung mga magsasaka nagtayo kami ng isang eskwela para sa kanila, kasi sa masa ako nandoon, doon ko nakikita lahat yung mga nawawala, yung mga tinotorture, yung mga pinapatay, doon sa masa naman lang nandoon. The thing is that sa akin napaka-importante yung decision namin na bumaba sa masa, na makipaghalubilo kami sa masa, kasi doon talaga ang nangyayari na kaya I cannot even say that there was something golden about the martial law, because I was totally together with the farmers, with the workers, with the urban poor, na wala silang araw-araw na sinasabi kundi yung kanilang kahirapan, yung kanilang nila na baka mawala ito. In fact, meron ding isang pare na kaibigan ko na nawala, remember si Kaloy Tayag, kasi may dalawang Benedictine ng Sambeda ang pumasok sa Kilusan. Tapos yung nanay ni Kaloy, I remember, would come to my office to talk with him kasi hinahanap nga sila. So doon sila sa opisina ko nag-uusap. Mamaya-maya na lang sinabi sa akin ng nanay niya nawawala si Kaloy. And do you know, until now, hindi natin alam kung saan nagpunta si Kaloy. Alam mo, kaya sabi nga ni Carol, ang hirap doon kasi walang closure. Yun ang mahirap doon. Kaya ganun na lang ang nag-edit kasi hindi niya mabigyan ng isang closure yung pagkawala ng anak niya. That is another thing. Kaya sa ako, I never saw anything golden about that, because I was all the time hearing day in and day out yung mga nahuhuli, yung mga inaaresto, yung mga nawala ng trabaho, yung ganun ba? How can I think of anything golden doon? Yun ang araw-araw na nakikita ko, no?
Mm-hmm. Professor Xiao,
Barnes,
yes,
I'd just like to add na tama si Xiao yung magnitude ng nakawan, yung magnitude ng pagnanakaw sa kaban ng bayan, at saka yung papaano piniga yung economy, no, by allowing the planned economy, allowing cronies and their foreign partners to come in and to make use of our own capital, magre-repatriate ng profits, pero hindi naman binabalik para sa bansa, so hindi umuunlad yung bansa. Ano yun hindi kagaya ng violations ng human rights and civil liberties, pero malaki ang nagagawa para sirain yung quality of life ng ordinaryong mamamayan, no? Halimbawa yung coconut levy fund. Yung coconut levy, Marcos legalized yung parang tax sa mga coconut farmers, no? And then yung tax na yon, hinawakan ni Danding Cojuangco at linagay sa mga korporasyon at saka bangko. basically ninakaw nila doon sa mga coconut farmers yan. Ano? And these are small people, maliliit na tao yan. Malaking bagay sa kanila yung kinaltas sa kanila. So, ano yan, it is not, hindi pwedeng magkaroon ng uprising against the Marcos dictatorship if everything was so bright and rosy, hindi ba, Mary Jan? If there is no,
paano?
if there is
Paano
no,
gagalit ang tao?
yes, if there is
Actually,
no,
Yes, actually, I want to ask, because EDSA happened in 1986, of course, and 1983, Senator Nino Aquino was assassinated, of course, who was a known opposition senator at the time. So between 1983 to 1986, I was a little kid, but of course, because of what we studied in school and because of what I've read all throughout the years, we know that those were very turbulent times. And syempre, na-culminate
Right.
na EDSA People Power in 1986. So I want to ask, actually, was it EDSA a clear indictment of the Marcos regime? Bakit tayo bumabalik dun sa debate na
Okay.
kung naging okay ba yung panahon ni Marcos or hindi? Parang that was supposed to be, when you think about it logically, that was supposed to be a clear indictment already.
Can I answer that?
Yes, Professor Shaw.
Apo. Well, first of all, Filipinos, sa totoo lang, let's be, frank about it. Most Filipinos are really fence-sitters. They will watch things that are unfolding, tinitignan muna kung magiging maganda ba o mabuti. And that's also the same case with what happened to Marcos. People were believing in their heart of hearts that martial law will probably give them something good. But of course, when the the turbulence in the economy happened by 83, diba, doon lang actually, aside from the Aquino assassination, in fact, si Ninoy was just the Ninoy assassination was just one of the events. Hindi mo pwedeng sabihin yan yung total trigger kasi sa totoo lang, 2 taon pa si Marcos na magtatagal. Diba? So he's just one of the events, but we recognize him. Pero alam nyo, nung nangyari lahat yun, kasi alam mo, sabi nga nung mga ekonomista, it's always the economy stupid, diba? So when the economy, we're already having an effect on people, doon talaga dumami yung suporta. Pero ito yung mahalaga, gusto ko po itong sabihin. Yung mga katulad ni Sister Mary Jan, eto ko, may picture po ako niya,
Oh my
nung
God.
siya ay bata pa, diba? Ayan po, no? Yung mga katulad ni Sister Mary
Oh
Jan,
my God.
yung mga katulad ni Ma'am Carol Araullo, kaya ko sinasabing personal heroes ko sila kasi nung panahon na wala pang nakikinig sa kanila masyado, sila yung nagbibinhi sa masa, nagbibinhi sa mga tao nung tamang dapat gawin. Kaya nung nagkaroon na nung pagkilos, yung mas maraming tao by 83 to 86, may sumalo sa kanila na mga organisasyon, may mga nagbuo sa kanila na mga tao. Kaya nagkaroon ng mga mas organisadong pagkilos ang tao na nagbunsod sa tagumpay. Pero lagi ko nga sinasabi, hindi 4-day revolution yun. 4-day peaceful revolution, akala ng tao mag-party ka lang sa EDSA, ibigay mo yung kalayaan mo sa isang diktador, mababalik mo agad, mag-party ka lang. Diba? That was 14 years of struggle. And Sister Mary Jan and Carol were in the middle of it. Pero anong nangyari? Diba? 4 days, parang ang nangyari dyan, masyadong mataas yung expectation natin sa EDSA. Kasi akala natin, pag nawala na si Marcos, babalik na ang ating kaginhawaan. Pero ang nangyari po dyan, may mga pangyayari na nakakalungkot na parang hindi nagbago ang lipunan. Bagamat maraming pagbabago na ibalik ang democratic space na tinatawag freedom of speech, parang yung pagnanakaw nagpatuloy, mas lumala pa nga in a way kasi mas marami na yung magnanakaw, 'di ba? Mas marami na yung mga kontrobersya. So doon sa palagay ko, kasi wag nating isisi lang sa teacher ng history. Wag lang nating isisi sa libro. Yung mga leader at yung mga tao na ginamit yung demokrasyang napanalunan natin para sa kanilang sariling pakinabang, yun talaga ang dahilan kung bakit ang tao na dismaya sa demokrasya at sinasabi na nila, sinusuka namin yung demokrasya na yan, ayaw namin ang human rights na yan, it did not work. Hindi nalutas ang krimen. Kaya eto tayo ngayon. Nagbabalik na naman tayo sa pagnanais sa kamay na bakal.
Okay. Professor Xiao, I know you mentioned na wag natin isisi lahat sa teachers tsaka sa education, at tsaka sa mga history books. Pero I want to ask sister, because a fellow educator and a fellow member of the religious community, just very recently, si Father Ranilio Aquino, he wrote on social media, and I will read verbatim para hindi po tayo magkamali, He wrote, "The present generation that is loud in its hindi ko mabasa sarili kong sulat, that is loud in its condemnation of Marcos, never experienced Marcos. So that rant is directed at their construct of Marcos." What are your thoughts on this, sister?
That is so stupid a remark. I'm sorry. I did not know Hitler also. Nobody of us knew Hitler. But we had no right to condemn Hitler. Ano pa naman klaseng, I cannot imagine a professor saying something like that. Wala siyang historical sense, ibig sabihin. No? That just because you do not experience it, wala nang kabuluhan, first hand. Ang dami naman natin hindi na e-experience ang first hand. But kung nakikita natin ang witness of people who were there, alam ka naman ng lahat ay ang mga tao ngayon, ang mga kabataan, ay puro sila puro skeptics. Yung gano'n, di wala na nga talaga dapat ang history, di ba? Professor Chua, kung hindi ka man maniniwala, kung hindi ka na maniniwala sa anything that you do not experience, what is the sense of history then? Wala. There is no point in history. At saka, can you experience everything? Ano ka ba? You are a very, very limited person. So, wala kang paniniwalaan kung hindi mo na-experience. Well, I'm sorry, but a very stupid remark coming from a professor.
Dr. Carol?
Sister, can I just add na, please, if you believe, di ba, yung teacher nyo, nung kinuwento niya si Rizal, bakit pinaniwalaan nyo? Best friend ba niya si Rizal? Nung kinuwento ng teacher nyo yung Battle of Mactan, bakit? Nandun ba siya? Kaibigan ba niya si Lapu-Lapu, di ba? So yun, parang ano ba yan? Are we disregarding that there's actually a historical discipline? Kaya tayo nag-aaral ng araling panlipunan. Yun lang naman.
Pero Dr. Carol, what is your reaction to this? That it's an educator who is saying this. Someone who has influence on the minds of the present generation.
Well, let me just comment that Father Ranilo, what is his family name?
Aquino
is pro Duterte. So he has a lot of he gets a lot of mileage sa totoo lang, no? Yung binibihisan niya with philosophical theories and the use of highfalutin words like constructs. Basically, he's just engaged in historical revisionism. Yun nga, dapat tayo, tapos na tayo dun kay Marcos. Dapat yun, pinabagsak ng mamamayan si Marcos through an uprising and the withdrawal of support by the military, the coming together of the opposition, and also binitiwan na ng backer niya na Amerikano si Marcos, hindi ba? So those confluence of events kicked out the dictator. That should have been settled. But why isn't it settled? Why? This historical revisionism thing is not something that is just the result of yung sin of omission ng mga history teachers or ng even the educational system. Although there is that. But the truth is, the Marcoses have come back with a vengeance. Sa totoo lang, the Marcoses were able to keep a lot of their loot. Maraming pera ang hawak ng mga Marcos. And yung tinatawag nilang Solid North, they were politically astute enough to develop bastion in the region, which is what Gloria Macapagal Arroyo did in the Visayas as well, and also in Central Luzon. The oppressors and exploiters, they also learn from history, no? So this historical revisionism thing is something that is being done very systematically. And one landmark is the yung paglibing kay Marcos sa libingan ng mga bayani, no? All the controversy about that, pwedeng sabihin ng mga historical revisionists na, nakalibing sa libingan ng mga bayani. Sino mga nakalibing doon? Di ba bayani? O di bayani siya. I mean, wala na all the debate, the controversy, papanong yung utang na loob ni Duterte sa mga Marcos allowed for this to happen, and even the Supreme Court just acquiesced to this yung isang rurok ng historical revisionism. Pero hindi lang yan. The Marcoses were able to nakabalik sa positions of power. So may economic power, meron pang political power. Nung umpisa sa Ilocos lang, no? And then they started to nakapasok na sa Senado, hindi ba? With Bongbong Marcos there. And then the attempt to get back to Malacanang, no, as the vice president of Duterte, kahit na si Alan Peter Cayetano ang official vice presidential candidate, all the money of the Marcoses and all the influence was being used to get him to be vice president. Kasi ano man ang mangyayari kay Duterte, at least konsolidado nila yung hawak nila sa poder. So this historical revisionism thing is being done very, very consciously, very systematically. And there are intellectuals like Father Ranilo, and also yung mga biographers like yung biographer ni Enrile, who will have Enrile say na hindi naman totoo na fake yung ambush sa kanya, babaguhin yung mga inamin niya nung panahon na nasusukol na siya at takot siya na baka hulihin na siya ni Marcos. All of a sudden, hindi nangyari yun. So, now going back to the reason why historical revisionism is happening, aside from it's very consciously and systematically being undertaken by the political heirs and the real heirs of Marcos and the cronies, it's because yung post-Marcos years, we're not able to resolve many deep-seated problems of Philippine society. Both the backwardness of the economy, yung social injustice, hindi ba, Sister Mary Jan? The poverty, the endemic poverty, the yawning gap between the rich and the poor, yung kalokohan ng eleksyon na sino ba ang pwedeng tumakbo at sino na ang mananalo kung hindi ka political dynasty, hindi ba? Ngayon, kung sino ang kaya mandaya in an electronic election, supposedly mas malinis kasi mas mabilis. Actually, bumibilis lang yung dayaan,
Oh.
So, all of these structural, systemic problems were really not addressed by the post-Marcos regimes. So, yung societal unrest, yung discontent, not necessarily yung organized, politically conscious, very, very, very analytical, political critique of the system, at saka yung programmatic ideas about how to change the system. Hindi posibleng yung mga hindi namumulat doon. Basta ang pakiramdam nila, ang dami yung sinasabi, hindi naman nag-improve yung situation after Marcos. And then here comes Imelda, and then here comes Bongbong, and here comes
Aimee.
Si Aimee. Very, very glib, napaka pro-poor, who talks as if they have the solutions. Kasi yung problema, yung matagal na problema, eating at the innards of society and alienating the massa, those who are not politicized, those who are not enlightened, naghahanap sila ng bakit ganito pa rin ang sitwasyon namin, di ba, Mary Jan? Bakit apo ko na ganito pa rin ang sitwasyon namin? Nagkaroon na ng presidenteng Santa, si Cory Aquino. Nagkaroon ng presidenteng general, si Ramos. Nagkaroon ng presidenteng artista. Nagkaroon ng presidenteng ekonomista. Nagkaroon ng presidenteng anak ni Cory. You know, and so there is really a backlash. Merong resback talaga ng na ayaw namin sa inyong lahat. Ibalik nyo sa amin ang isang strong man na who will sweep away all our problems. And so that's how we got Duterte. Diba?
I'm gonna pick up on that, Dr. Carol. Ang dami niyong sinabi, pero kasi, sister, maybe you can answer this. May mga nagsasabi kasi na the Aquinos, and you know this, di ba? Parang ang nagiging narrative kasi ngayon is Dilawan versus Marcoses / Duterte. Parang nagiging two sides na
Araullo.
/ Arroyo. And so parang nagiging two sides na lang yung story natin ngayon, pero meron kasi mga nagsasabi na the Aquinos, when they took power, they were too soft on the Marcoses at pinayagan pa nilang bumalik dito sa Pilipinas. So masisisi nga ba natin yung mga subsequent governments after Marcos? And in connection with that, syempre ngayon dumating na tayo sa panahon ni Duterte, and it looks like yun nga President Duterte or the Marcoses has the all-out support of President Duterte, and dumating na tayo dito sa point na Congress proposing a Marcos holiday, although sa Ilocos nga lang daw ito nga yung defense nila. Sa Ilocos naman, they really love former President Marcos. So, hindi siya part ng historical revisionism daw, sister.
First of all, I don't call it historical revisionism. I call it historical distortion. That is the more correct expression, I think. At the reason why walang nangyayari kasi it's a change of persons, not of system. Pareho pa rin ang sistema. Napapalitan lang yung tao na gumagamit ng sistema. Paano magkakaroon ng tunay na pagbabago kung yung sistema ay pareho pa rin? Hindi ba? Ang naiisip ko nga noon, yung talagang yung after Marcos, kung sana, I mean, Cory, I like Cory, and I'm sure she's not a corrupt person. But I was thinking there were two things that she could have done. One is talaga sanang nag-land reform siya ng kanilang sarili. Tapos at that moment, when she has the moral power, would ask all the landowners of the country, I did it already, you do it also. That would have solved our yung land reform na sinasabi natin. There would have been a genuine land reform na hindi lang pagbibigay ng land kundi with the technical help and all the and stuff. Another thing is there was so much sa Pilipinas noon she was even given the right to speak sa American Congress. At that point she had also the moral na nag-uumpisa kami ng demokrasya. I am asking that our debt will be abrogated or at least ang pagbabayad namin postpone for 20 years or 50 years. These two things could have made a change, I think. But hindi nga nangyari.
How about the treatment of the Marcoses?
The
Marcoses.
Actually, ang pumayag na iuwi dito yung katawan
si
Si Ramos. Yeah.
Si Ramos hindi Cory. Si Ramos.
Pero nakabalik si Imelda prior to the 1992 election. So pinabalik din ni Cory. Kasi 'di ba forgiveness, 'di ba? Humanitarian, may mga ganyang considerations na sinasabi sila eh.
So it really, it shows. That's why EDSA was not a revolution. It was not a revolution. Kasi sa totoong revolusyon,
sistema
they would have been lined up against the wall. I mean, metaphorically. One law that could have been passed by a revolutionary government after Marcos is that they would be banned from public office for, let's say, a century. Diba? And then, sister, yung isa pang yung dismantling ng mga mga dynasties, yung dismantling ng regional power bases. Importante 'yon, no? Pero kasi talaga, to her credit, ang naibalik ni Cory Aquino were the trappings of liberal democracy. Pagbalik ng mass media, yung pagbalik na kongreso, di ba? So, pero ano, balik mo nga ang kongreso, pero ang itsura ng kongreso, ngayon nga, ang dami nagsasabi, abolish na yung kongreso na yan dahil ang gastos-gastos no? And wala namang matinong malabas dyan. No? So, and you know what else could have happened in a major way if the peace negotiations between the CPP, NPA, NDF had been seriously undertaken, Kaya lang ang objective lang talaga nung peace negotiations na yon, magkaroon ng ceasefire, and then paghuhulihin nila yung mga naglabasan para sumama dun sa talks. Ang dami-daming namatay noon, ang dami-daming nahuli. And then the massacre that happened in Menjola. Remember, sister, the massacre of the peasants. Na kahit na sina Senator Jokno, si Pepe Jokno, si Senator Chiquito Bengona, sinabihan nila yung negotiating panel ng NDF, sina Saturo Campo, sina Antonio Zumel, we cannot guarantee your safety. We cannot guarantee that the peace talks will continue. Kasi si Cory came to a point that she was so besieged by the military. No, there were so many coup attempts. Do you remember? So,
7.
One of the objectives there was to win away the loyalty of the active armed forces from the president. And in order to deal with that, napilitan si Cory to resort to more militarist means to address the rebellion, to address the insurgency. Kailangan siya gumamit ng kamay na bakal para yung militar ma-assure na she was not going soft on the communists. No? Kaya nga in other countries, yung mga pumapasok sa mga peace negotiations, yun yung mga leaders who are either former military men or who are so consolidated in their hold on power that they can go and have peace negotiations with rebels.
But Professor Xiao, just to be clear, malinaw po yung record ng corruption ng Marcos regime, malinaw po yung record ng human rights abuses ng Marcos regime.
Of course.
Yes, definitely. Dokumentado yan. And in fact, it's may batas na pinatibay na i-compensate ang mga victims at merong memorial commission na ginawa para ipunin lahat ng mga human rights violations na yan at tignan yung mga kaso kung sino bibigyan ng kompensasyon at magtayo ng isang memorial para sa mga biktima ng martial law. So ano yan, at maraming panalong mga kaso, halimbawa sa Hawaii, nanalo yung sa 1081, claimants 1081, nanalo sila. Ang Switzerland nagbalik ng 640, if I'm not mistaken, $640 million. Diba? So, ano yan? Victory yan. Unang bansa sa mundo na nagsoli ng nakaw na yaman sa isang bansa. So, maraming kaso. Kaso minsan, yung ibang mga kaso nanalo para sa mga Marcos for technicality. Kasi patay na si Marcos eh. Hindi mo na pwedeng kasuhan ng patay. Yun ang problema dun sa ibang mga kaso. So, yun yung sinasabi natin na nananalo daw sila sa legal. But anyway, yes, maliwanag po yun. Sa mga historians, maliwanag yung sabihin natin na may mga achievements na sinasabi na parang initiatives, pero yung mga good initiatives na yan, binayaran ng taong bayan yan, tapos ito pa, kumikbak din sila. Yun yung nakikita natin kung gusto natin ng medyo balance.
I just like to quickly add, one of the things that the Marcoses, Sina Imelda, were trying to do with the class suit in Hawaii ng mga human rights victims. Sabi nila
Yes.
magbabayad sila ng compensation kung papayag yung mga victims na i-archive, itatago under lock and key all the depositions, forever.
No way.
Na. And to the credit of the victim, sabi nila, kahit hindi nyo kami bayaran ng isang kusing, hindi na yan i-atras because that is a foolproof documentation of the horrendous
Right.
violations of the Marcos dictatorship.
Okay. Just real quick, kasi sabi ng producer ko, wala na raw po tayong oras. Pero
Overtime.
ano pa sana kailangan i-discuss, Pero yung role lang po ng Duterte administration, sister, gaya ng sinasabi nyo dito sa, like you said, I'm gonna quote you, dito sa historical distortion. Gaano kalaki yung role ng Duterte administration? At itutuloy ko na po yung tanong ko, para sa inyong tatlo na rin, ano yung nakikita nyong similarities between nung panahon ng martial law, nung panahon ni Marcos, at saka yung nangyayari ngayon dito sa panahon ng administrasyong Duterte? Let's start with you, sister.
Okay. Yung ang role ng, siyempre, it is with their consent, it is with their help na nangyayari ito. So it is the facilitating atmosphere for this historical distortion. Now, yung comparison sinasabi mo, alam mo, it is even worse. I'm sorry, but I find this worse. All the atrocities, human rights violation is the same as in Marcos. Ang addition dito ngayon, kabastusan. Excuse me. Yun ang, hindi, kahit na kagalit ako kay Marcos, wala akong na mga nakitang kagaya ngayon na masyadong, parang the new normal ngayon is kabastusan. Magmula sa presidente at na i-infect lahat. Yung mga tao na hindi nagmumura na rin. Ibig sabihin, napaka-infectious. Kaya sa akin, yung moral fiber, yung galit na galit ako kay Marcos, but it never entered my mind na yung moral fiber natin ay nawawala. Pero now, dito sa administration ni Duterte, I am very convinced na our moral fiber is being eroded, Kaya nagkaroon tayo ng culture of death. Now, lahat ng solusyon patayin. 'Di ba? Tapos yung loss of respect for person, mura ng mura, kahit na Pope minumura, pati God minumura. Ano ba 'yan? Yung walang respeto sa law. Ano ba yung law na 'yan na paalisin mo si Sereno na hindi naman lawful? Ilalagay mo si Laila de Lima sa preso na hindi rin lawful. So, sila mismo ang nagbabiolate ng law at hindi lang 'yon. Yung sinasabi nilang they are weaponizing the law against people, Tapos yung lack of respect for truth, fake news. Ang fake news hindi lang mga trolls ganyan, pati sila. Fake news din ang mga pinagsasasabi nila, So, yun ang sinasabi ko. At kahit na mawala na sila, itong pag na-erode ang moral fiber mo, ang hirap mo ibalik yan kasi it needs decades for a people to strengthen and to develop its moral fiber. Ito is being eroded not very slowly, very fast. Tingnan mo na ngayon how they act. Parang wala nang respeto sa law. Kahit na clear na mali, parang tama pa rin. Ano ba yun? Diba? So yun ang assessment ko sa nangyayari.
Does it feel worse, or does it feel like we're under martial rule without an actual declaration of martial law?
Yeah, as I said, in almost all the human rights violation is talagang pareho. Yun nga lang, itong ang moral fiber natin na i-erode. At saka yung dignity natin dahil sa kabastusan, nawawala tayo ng dignity sa buong mundo. Ano ba? Diba? Nakakahiya tayo.
Dr. Carol, do you feel the same way?
Duterte is a self-admitted iniidolo niya si Marcos, So he thinks he's doing a Marcos, but actually, because he is much less intelligent, he's much less smart. He's much less smarter than Marcos. And uh, wala siyang pakundangan about international human rights reputation. Wala siyang pakialam kung papatayin niya kahit na madre yan o pari yan, you know. The killings now, the extrajudicial killings now, they include bishops, priests, pastors, church workers, human rights workers, lawyers, judges. Ano na, wala na, yung sinasabi mo, Sister Mary Jano, na pagka madre ang nasa harapan, hindi aatakihin ng mga militar. Hindi na totoo yan ngayon.
Totoo,
No?
hindi na.
Wala nang sinasanto. May sinabi si General Parlade at saka si General Galvez sa isang interview sa kanila sa interview ni Tina Monson Palma during this time na may sinasabing may October plot. I think that was in 2018. Sabi nila, natuto na raw sila doon sa martial law. Hindi na nila gagawin yung mga mali nila doon sa martial law. But actually, ang nangyayari ngayon, you're correct, Barnes, it is not a formally declared martial law, but a martial rule.
Yeah.
There are more ex-military men, generals in the police and military who are now dominating the cabinet. Even a task force that is supposed to deal with the health crisis brought on by COVID-19 is led by generals. The local government portfolio is handled by a general. So talagang minilitarized na yung civilian bureaucracy. And Duterte himself has admitted that the backbone of his regime is the military. And then yung sinasabi nila Senator De Lima na ano yung term, Sister Mary Jan, the use of the law, the use
Weaponizing.
of the weaponizing the law, the use of the law. They're running after their critics and the opposition using the Securities and Exchange Commission, using the BIR, using the National Telecommunications Commission, of course Congress. Talagang gagamitin ng lahat, and the point is, and of course yung pagpatay. Mas marami talaga ang pinatay nitong rehimen ni Duterte. Dun sa war against drugs, umaabot na ng tens of thousands, no? And then among the dissidents and the activists, in their hundreds ang namamatay na, at ang displacement sa communities because they have been bombing communities of the Lumad. So si Duterte is a Marcos wannabe, but because of the extent of the crisis of society, and because of the infighting, the wanting to remain in power, mas garapal at saka mas vicious at mas brutal at mas manipis yung tabing, di ba, sister? Manipis yung tabing. Hindi kagaya kay Marcos, he was conscious about legality. He was conscious about appearances. He was conscious about his reputation in the international community. Pero kay Duterte,
Walang pakialam.
kasi ano na nga they were able to sell the notion na ang kailangan ng Pilipinas yung kanto boy, yung gago-gago, yung walang sasantuhin. And that is our president. Brutal na walang sasantuhin, papatay. Yung sinungaling, ano yun, he will tell a brazen lie and then turn around and something
Joke lang.
he was lying, no? But ganon kagrabe. And yung tama si Sister Mary Jan, yung lahat ng the worms have come out of the woodwork because of this kind of presidency that we have. Lahat ng walang kwentang klase ng tao at saka walang kwentang klaseng pag-iisip na bibigyan ng puwang ngayon. And in fact, binabayaran yung mga DDS na yan, yung mga trolls. People who don't have any other source of income but to become trolls for the government. So this government really has malaki ang kasalanan, malaki ang pananagutan, and malaki ang accountability. That's why they will do everything that so that they will not be taken out of power by 2022.
Professor Xiao, final question is for you.
Mm-mm.
How do you think both Marcos and Duterte will go down in history? And I can't believe I'm still asking you about Marcos. Like I said, I thought he was already indicted by the 1986 revolution. But do you think that this historical revisionism or distortion, as Sister Mary John has said, is going to succeed? And will the same thing happen, you think, with Duterte? Years down the line, it will still not be so clear exactly what his role in our history has been?
Okay. Alam natin na kaya nagkakaroon ng pag-iiba ng pananaw sa kasaysayan ay sapagkat nagagamit sa politika ang mga pangyayari sa kasaysayan, ang mga personalidad ng nakaraan. That's why if you're going to look at it, 'di ba? Bumabalik kasi yung mga Marcos eh. Wala namang Quirino na bumabalik. Kaya yung mga yon history na. Wala namang Rizal na tumatakbo sa pagka-presidente. 'Di ba? Pero dahil yung mga Marcos ay mga politiko, kailangan isama nila. Kaya nga actually naawa na rin ako kay Marcos. Dahil si Marcos sinasakyan pa rin ng maraming tao. 'Di ba? Dapat nananahimik na lang siya. Yun ang problema natin. So, what I think is this, Duterte and Marcos, hanggat ginagamit sila sa politika, hanggang potent, makapangyarihan, may gahum yung kanilang pangalan, hindi talaga matatapos yung pag-iba sa kasaysayan. Pero ako bilang isang historiador ay mayroong pag-asa. Bakit? Sapagkat pagdating ng panahon, di ba may mga panahon din na ang tingin natin kay Jose Rizal ay gusto na nating itapon sa Kumunoy. Pero eventually, tinignan ng mga historiador na balanse. Meron siyang mga pagkukulang at meron siyang mga magagandang ginawa. Di ba? Pagdating ng panahon, ang ebidensya ang mananatili. Kaya ang importante, isulat ng isulat. Maganda na sina Ma'am Carol, sina Sister Mary Jan, may libro. Dalawa na yung librong nabili ko kay Sister Mary Jan among her many books. Kinekwento nila at kinekwento natin, kaming mga bata, hindi nakaranas doon, ikukwento namin at ikakwento ng mga anak namin based on evidence, based on historiography. Alam kong magkakaroon din ng sense na ito talaga yung nangyari. Pero kailangan, hindi mo na sila gamitin sa politika.
All right. And on that note, thank you so much, Dr. Carol Araullo, Sister Mary John Mananzan, and Professor Xiao Chua. Thank you so much for your time. Overtime po tayo. Pero I think we had a very substantial discussion, and I hope we can have a part 2 of this, because half of my questions I wasn't able to.
Sure.
For having us.
And my apologies as well to our audience on Facebook. We didn't have time to get to your comments and your questions. But before I let the three of you go, and before I let our audiences go, I want to do something, because again, it's 2 days before September 21st, and of course we're marking the 1972 Declaration of Martial Rule, and we all know what that means for the press, because at the time there was hardly any free press, and now that is exactly what is happening right now again, with the shutdown of ABS-CBN, with the conviction of Maria Ressa for cyber libel in court, and various other battles that Philippine media has been fighting these last few years. I got this face mask from the National Union of Journalists of the Philippines, and it's very fitting. I think it's very symbolic because of what is happening to Philippine press right now, and because it is we are experiencing a pandemic right now, and of course we are all mandated to wear masks in public. So I think this is a very fitting symbol of everything that's been going on right now. So allow me to wear the mask to end the program.
Ah!
Bigyan mo
Wow.
yan, ha?
And again, I hope you can still hear me clearly. Again, thank you so much to our three guests. Thank you to everyone who's watching us right now. Viewpoint is on every Saturday on the Facebook page of Now You Know PH. Again, my name is Barnaby Lo. This is Viewpoint. Now you know.